Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to today's online lecture on unveiling solutions to support sustainability in fashion with a focus on reducing environmental impact and emissions. We have with us Ms. Radha Khera. She's a managing associate at Remfry and Sagar and a member of the editorial board at Fashion Law Journal and the IP Press. Ms. Khera holds a bachelor's in English literature from Miranda House, LLB from Delhi University, and LLM from the University of Southern California, as well as a LLM in fashion law from Louis Guido, Carlo University, Italy. Without any further ado, I invite Ms. Khera to begin with the session.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. As Anushka already mentioned about the topic that we're going to discuss today, firstly, thank you all for having me on board to deliver this lecture. The topic of sustainability and ethical fashion is very close to my heart, as it is to many of us in the times that we're living in today. Since I'm an IP lawyer, I have to add all disclaimers. First, the thoughts that I'm going to share with all of you today are purely my own and may or may not resonate with those of the ideologies of my firm or anyone else. The lecture for today is going to be from a legal angle, of course. It is not a class in morality. I'm not here to tell you all to be sustainable. I'm not here to tell you what is it that you should do to be sustainable. These are things that I will very subtly touch on for those who want to take cues from this. But what we will discuss today is sustainability, ethics in the realm of fashion, touching upon intellectual property, because innovation, protection, intellectual property, sustainability, all of this go hand in hand. And we will see this as we go along the presentation. Now, before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about how India as a country has a very strong heritage. um, I believe that the Indian way of living is very sustainable. From the very beginning, we've always seen many generational handed downs. We believe in reuse and repair rather than replace. Something goes bad, we try and fix it and we use it. And earlier people used to all be like, hey, get something new. But now, as awareness is rising, people have increasingly started to realize that they need to contribute to reducing their impact on the environment. Let's get started. Firstly, why is this conversation on sustainability important today? Now, India is the second largest producer of textiles globally. There are millions of people here. There are several artisans, several artists, several designers. Our heritage goes way back. We'll see in the coming slides as well. But the thing is that textile industry globally is one of the largest polluters. Um, what that does is that in light of the sustainable development goals that has been set by the United Nations, every country is trying to reduce their environmental impact. What is that leading to is that industries, which are the largest contributors, are increasingly feeling the need to contribute in their own way by reducing their environment on through the carbon footprints, water footprints, and many other efficient ways of utilizing the existing resources. While there are many things to discuss in this topic, I'll try and discuss only a limited few because we want to wrap it up in time as well. But I'm open to discussion at any point of time. You'll be given my contact details. I'm happy to discuss this further in, specific liaison on a particular topic. Now, what happens in the fashion industry? You all may know that there's something that you're creating, then it's being made, it's being produced, it's being marketed, it's being sold. As a consumer, I'm using it, then I'm throwing it away at some point of time. Now, once I throw it away, what is it going to do? There is going to be a lot that in terms of, waste impact. So those are the things that we will be talking about. When I speak specifically for India, we know that we are known as one of the largest cotton suppliers. But at the same time, cotton as a crop is very thirsty. It requires a lot of water to just make one. cotton t-shirt. That's something that I will get to as well. Then there are many other, fibers, many fibers that are used. They can be synthetic, they can be, man-made. Of course, synthetics man-made, and they can be natural fibers. So everything has a particular footprint on the environment. Statistics have that industrial water pollution in India for textiles is a significant share which cannot be ignored. And as the fashion industry increasingly realizes its contribution to the global environmental footprints, it is endeavoring to work in new ways um, to provide a system where consumers and brand owners alike are able to strike a balance between living the fashion, loving the fashion, and loving the environment at the same time. Now, why is this change happening? This change is happening because fashion is changing. There is conscious consumerism, which is significantly on the rise. What does that mean? That means that the consumer today is very sensitive to how a brand is performing ethically, sustainably, socially, politically, and every other manner. Now, what conscious consumerism does is it takes into account the ethical, social, and environmental values of a particular product. Many brands we will see as we go along have started taking the initiative to maybe use new technology, come up with more ethically sourced products, come up with more sustainable products, so that there is reduced guilt in consumers when they are buying something. Apart from reduced guilt, we've seen this, that Gen Z is a very sensitive generation, and they are going to be one of the largest consumers of luxury in the coming years, not one of the largest consumers of luxury in the coming years. So as a generation, they're very aware to the social changes, the political changes, the environmental changes. Because of this, now there is increasing demand and increasing need of sustainable fashion. This is balanced with the cost concerns that lie behind fast fashion versus slow fashion. India as a country, of course, there are all sort of income groups which have to be factored when we discuss sustainability. And while, remember, I said that India has a sustainable heritage, but when we speak specifically in terms of fashion, there is a lot of fashion waste as well. Now, to bridge this gap between conscious consumerism and what the brands are trying to do in terms of the environmental footprints, there is a new concept which we have been hearing about a lot, which is that of green branding and greenwashing. Now, green branding basically includes where a brand is trying to promote itself as greener than what they've been earlier. But greenwashing is when these claims are just claims, but they're not really happening in reality. Either they're not backed with the evidence, or the brand is not doing as much as it is claiming to be doing. We will be discussing about the legalities that are involved around greenwashing as well. But as I mentioned, there's like a brief synopsis of how the textile and the clothing industry is the second largest polluting industry. About 17 to 20% of global water pollution is attributed to this particular industry. More than 20,000 liters of water is used to crop 1 kg of cotton, and so on and so forth. Of course, global carbon emissions, more than 10%, are attributed to this industry. Now, what is sustainable and ethical fashion from a practical perspective? How is it measured? What is conscious consumerism? These are things that we will briefly touch upon in the coming slides. I spoke about it briefly. Actually, our oldest sacred texts, which is of the Vedas, they incidentally contain several references to environmental protection and ecological balance. This indicates that since time immemorial, awareness on sustainability has been an Indian way of living. Go back to 4000 BC. India was shorthand for cotton in ancient Greece and Babylon. India's natural dyes have been very well known since ages. Fast forward on the present day today, we are the second largest producer of cotton in the world, second largest producer of silk. 95% of the world's hand woven fabric comes from India. Why are these stats important? You would have seen in the past few years, India is increasingly gaining a global spotlight when it comes to fashion. Just now we saw when Christian Dior did its show at the Gateway of India in Mumbai. Chanakya School of Craft is a partner, of course, as a partner. They've been supplying, the artisans have been creating embroideries for international fashion houses since forever. Indian designers are increasingly going global. We've seen about Rahul Mishra, Gaurav Gupta, Vaishali S. They are creating fashion which is being adorned and worn by international celebrities. So Indian fashion is definitely within the spotlight today. And it has been somewhere always in the past, but now with all these the fabric of cultural appreciation, frontline workers giving credit where it's due, it's increasingly gaining spotlight. Now, what is sustainable fashion? What is ethical fashion? Usually, these are concepts which are used interchangeably. And although, in the larger realm of things, I also like to talk about sustainable and ethical fashion together. But for the sake of understanding, which is what I always told myself that this is how I should, compartmentalize it. To me, sustainable fashion focuses on minimizing environmental impact. It emphasizes on the eco friendliness of a product, whether a garment is long enough to be used, whether it is recyclable. It is all about how one is making responsible choices in light of the many environmental challenges that we are facing in the world. Ethical fashion, on the other side, of course, includes sustainability, but it adds a fabric of social responsibility. Not only is a product to be sustainable, but it also needs to have a background of fair trade practices. Um, Eco conscious methods have been used to minimize any kind of harm, which applies to any and every stage of the supply chain. So, whether it is procurement, sourcing, raw material, distribution, return policies, or fair wages for the workers, it will encompass anything and everything. um, just a brief. These are some of the factors that lay behind sustainable fashion, which is like, as I mentioned, this is primarily about sustainability and how eco conscious and eco friendly a product is. So, how is the production method of the textile? What is the material that is being used to create this particular product? Does this product have any certifications or standards? It meets any globalized or Indian specific measurements in terms of whether it is qualifying to be a sustainable brand or not. Is it recyclable? Is it something that cannot be recycled? How sustainable is the packaging involved in this product? What's the amount of energy and resources that are going behind the making of this product? Once this product is made and being used, and even when it is not being used, but being, say, we saw so many brands when they destroy their inventory because it's unsold. A lot of backlash came on that as well. So what is it that brands are doing to efficiently manage their waste and pollution? These are all key factors in understanding whether a particular brand is sustainable or not. Ethically, use of sustainable materials is, of course, important. That's a consideration. Now, how ethical is your supply chain? Where are you procuring your material from? Is it that the laborers are being paid well? Are their working conditions good? We've read about, we all know about, sweatshops, right working conditions, and ethical supply chain and labor practices. I feel that, of course, these have always been important, but ever since the Rana Plaza disaster came by in Bangladesh, where a lot of workers, died, and unfortunate things happened, and so ethical supply chain is very important in terms of understanding whether fashion is ethical or not. How well are you treating your frontline workers? Are your laborers paid well? Are there fair wages, and as per their working conditions, are they good? Carbon reduction, of course. What's the commitment of the brand? Um, how much is a brand factoring that they are going to commit to, their ESG, their carbon footprints, their brand ethos, whether they are adopting green business practices in general, whether they are taking care of diversity and inclusion. And, these are things that are increasingly getting a lot of weightage. Um, until a few years ago, it was not easy to find fashion in all sizes. And any big sizes fashion had to be, tailor made, or you would have had to customize it. But speaking of today, as of now, and I'm a plus size girl, so for me to be able to find fashion choices, it's become so much more easier because many brands are, committing to diversity and inclusion. At the same time, there are some brands, and I don't know how they justify it, but yeah, there is the concept of, use of additional fabric, calling for critics call it the what's it called? Critics call it the fat tax. That if you have to pay for a bigger size or in a particular clothing, then it's maybe it's right because the use of fabric is definitely much more. But yeah, these are things which brands are increasingly including, which is women of all sizes, men of all sizes, women of all, age group. So fashion's ageless, of course, of all age, of all sizes, of different abilities. These are things which are increasingly getting the limelight, and these are things which are increasingly being catered to by the fashion brands. How much is a particular brand, charitable or community driven? These are all. These are all, but some of the factors which comprise a brand as ethical fashion brand. I briefly mentioned this, but when we speak about ethics and sustainability, it is the entire fashion supply chain, which really has to be seen in the light of um, all the plans that are being envisioned for this. So, whether it is procurement of raw materials, suppliers, manufacture, how the manufacturer is making it, how is it being distributed, how is it being retailed, how are the retailers selling it to the consumers, how are the consumers making use of it. So, these are all stages of the supply chain which have to be factored. Um, in terms of analyzing and assessing whether a particular brand is sustainable and ethical. Walking the talk, I love this example because, a country always follows the path of what they see. And I have to say this that, a couple of years ago, I think this was somewhere in 2023, Prime Minister wore this recycled jacket, which was made of, the plastic bottles. And it was a fashion statement, of course. Um, Over the years, many fashion brands have started innovating to, be more sustainable, to efficiently utilize the resources and come up with unique ways of creating fashion. Some examples include um, leather made out of mango, fabric made of coffee, and clothing made of coffee. So I love this that you can drink your coffee and you can wear your coffee as well. In the Philippines, for instance, there's pineapple, which is being used to make fabric and clothing. There's hemp, there's mushroom, there is floral waste as well, which is being used to, create fashion. There's a brand in India which has been using floral waste from temples to create colors and fabric on a particular clothing items. There are other brands which are also using floral waste. We know about, used for incense and other things, but different forms of, day to day, say something like fruits or vegetables, sometimes even waste, like even garbage is being used to recreate and make fashion. And this is increasingly happening since the past few years because people are trying to come up with unique ways of recreating fashion. There is demand, yes. There is need, yes. Every country has targets to achieve net zero. And it is the statistics have that a lot of consumers are increasingly finding the need to be more sustainable. They are willing to pay more to buy sustainable clothing. Um, but of course, there are challenges. Developing sustainable materials requires a lot of research and development, which is something which can be a bit challenging for smaller brands or brands which have limited resources. Um, Sustainable clothing we have seen, sustainable fashion we have seen, uh, is more in costs when compared to regular clothing. Um, on this, I would like to just briefly mention I was reading that, France introduced this thing about fast fashion tax. Like, for every fast fashion cloth that is going to be sold, they're going to add a tax to that. And this is probably done with the endeavor of, making slow fashion as affordable as fast fashion. So there's a lot that we can think of that might come up in the near future. But as of now, yes, it's a challenge because sustainable clothing is costlier than regular clothing, regular fashion. Then there are, of course, there are some gaps that exist in cross-border intellectual property enforcement, which may, impact innovation and fair competition. Then we've seen that, fast fashion has a tendency to create um, a lot of inspired clothing from slow fashion brands. So there are a bit of tricky challenges there as well. Another very important segment, which is gaining attention in the realm of sustainability, is thrift fashion or secondhand fashion, also commonly known as pre loved fashion. Secondhand clothing sales are on track to make up a tenth of the global fashion market in 2025. Stats have that demand for vintage bags in 2024 was up by 300% since 2020. Recently, we may have seen in the news that Paris Hilton opened the door for her closet for an exceptional sale on Westerwear Collective. Uh, These are just small examples, and these stats are just a small indication of the kind of potential that the secondhand fashion market is getting. There are some brands internationally which have launched their own secondhand stores. So you can literally visit that particular brand's own store, which is solely selling pre-loved fashion. And how amazing is that? Because um, millennials, Gen Z, and a lot of consumer these days are preferring to buy secondhand fashion, specifically when you speak of designer wear. They're getting the craftsmanship, they're getting the same luxury feel at reduced prices. They want to spend, but they want to spend smart. So there is a lot of potential that pre-loved and thrift fashion has been gaining recently. As a matter of fact, there's an article from this morning, which says that for young Indians, pre-loved fashion is the new work and sustainable trend gaining stream. Now, of course, they say that the rising cost of designer goods has prompted many millennials and Gen Z who prioritize both affordability and sustainability to explore alternate ways to access luxury. This explains why the pre loved market is gaining momentum in India. Exciting times for the realm of fashion. Here, before I move on, there are, of course, some intellectual property concerns that rise here, but we'll not be touching upon that right now. We'll discuss it a bit briefly in the coming slides or through a separate talk sometime. Now, the thing is that when we speak about sustainability, this talk is gaining so much importance because 66% of global consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable goods. However, there are global reports which are finding that 40% of companies that are making misleading claims related to the environment. For instance, in the European Union, 40% of green claims lacked supporting evidences. Over half of all green labels in the European Union provide weak or no verification. Stats have that 58% of shoppers are skeptical of green product claims, and a staggering 42% of the companies have false or exaggerated claims. As many as 95% of products on the market claim to be green, have some form of greenwashing involved. 59% have misleading green claims as well. So, this talk, while it is important in a lot of ways, legally it is attracting a lot of issues to be reconsidered, which is why we are seeing a lot of laws that are also shaping up across the globe. This brings us to the topic of greenwashing. I touched on it briefly, but I want to explain this a little bit more because we should be aware of it's say no to greenwashing is probably one of the biggest solutions to achieving sustainability. So, what is greenwashing? It is a marketing strategy where brands and companies promote themselves as environmental friendly when in fact their actions are inconsistent with their claims. I'm going to drop a fun fact here. It started with a towel. Someone, an American environmentalist, he was on a holiday in Fiji, and he saw that there was a hotel which had this reusing the towel and whether you don't want to wash it again. And um, they had that they were promoting it as save water, save environment. He found that to be a bit at odds because the hotel was under process of expansion, um, which would have impacted the natural environmental resources. And it was in his essay back in 1986, I think, when he first mentioned the word called greenwashing. Now, to address greenwashing in India, so far until 2024, we did not have specific laws on greenwashing, but it was more or less covered as misleading advertisements under ASCI, the Advertisement Standard Council of India, which is a self-regulatory body, and as and under the Consumer Protection Act as unfair trade practices. ASCII, which is, as I mentioned, the Advertising Standard Council of India. It gives a code which ensures that there's truthfulness and honesty in advertisement. That advertisement not offensive, it's not hazardous, and advertisements must observe fairness and competition. Now, in 2022, guidelines for prevention of misleading advertisements were released by CCPA. Uh, in 2024, ASCII came up with its own code of guidelines. And in October 2024, the Central Consumer Protection Authority also introduced guidelines on greenwashing. Now, I'll just touch upon it very briefly. Now, what is green claim? Any kind of claim which states that the product has a neutral or positive impact on the environment, is comparatively less damaging to the previous version, is less damaging to the environment than a competitor's goods, or has specific environmental benefits. Any kind of green claims now have to be backed up with sufficient scientific evidence. This is important because this is a way to ensure that greenwashing is avoided, which means that companies that will genuinely be putting in the effort to be sustainable and green will be able to tell it to the clients that, hey, yes, we are sustainable, and the claims that we are making are backed by the requisite evidence. Parallel from the concept of greenwashing is a concept called green hushing, where brands which are actually doing something for the environment are understating their claims in fear of being pulled up for greenwashing. If we see, there are ample examples across the globe where brands from every industry, including the fashion industry, have been pulled up and called out for greenwashing, claiming their clothing to be sustainable, eco friendly, organic, and so on and so forth. So, this is this is something that we are seeing. For instance, of course, the US is one of the countries which has the green code since many years, but the European Union directives coming up relating the green claims. India now has specific guidelines which have been introduced by ASCII and also now by CCPA. So we can see that law is shaping up and evolving and expanding to address problems that are emanating from the need that is being felt to be more sustainable. Now, when we speak about sustainability, we have to understand that um, it is always a company's and a brand's prerogative to be, more sustainable, because if they're promoting themselves as sustainable, a consumer is building that trust on what you're offering. What becomes paramount is that everything that you're creating needs to be protected, it needs to be preserved, it needs to be enforced, so that brands and companies have the motivation to create and to innovate. This is where the role of intellectual property really comes in. We'll briefly touch upon what's intellectual property in fashion. As you can see, I've just put some pictures. So, intellectual property, we all, I'm sure many of you already know about it, but um, just to still give a bit of a brief for those who don't, it's a property which is created by the intellect, simply speaking. If you're creating something subject to certain terms and conditions, because depending on what your creation is, you can be protected, you know, maybe if it's a trademark, it's a copyright, it's a design, it's a patent, specifically and particularly in fashion. So, for example, there's a necklace, there's a bag, there's a watch, there's a silhouette gown, there's a sketch of a sari, there are these, Valentino rock star shoes, there's this dress, the shoe hat, the name of a particular brand. All of these can be protected and are protected as intellectual property. Now, trademarks, first form of intellectual property that I would speak about. Now, what is trademark? Simply speaking, anything that identifies a brand and the source of a product, distinguishing itself from a competitor's product. So, how do I know that? Okay, if I'm going to buy to Adidas to buy those shoes, the minute I look at these three stripes, I know that it's Adidas shoe, right? It's different from Nike, which is the swoosh logo. Similarly, if I look at, say, when I walk into an Apple store, I can see and I can tell that it's an Apple store. Similarly, a makeup brand, Kiko, for instance, if I walk into the store, I know that it's Kiko. I look at this Tiffany blue box, and I know that it's Tiffany. Um, you look at a red sole shoe, it's Christian Louboutin, and you look at this Wink logo, that is Chiara Ferragni. So this is what trademarks are able to protect, which is the name, the brand, the logo, the sometimes even the shape, the color combinations, the position, single letters, such as in the case of Hermes, store layouts. Of course, there are non-traditional trademarks, patterns. These can all be protected as trademarks. You would recall that some time ago when I started the presentation, I touched on green branding. Now, brands to be green are adopting a lot of green branding, which is either by using terms and words which suggest greenliness, or add logos which have some kind of a reflection on the environment. There were some stats which said that the European Union, for instance, saw a significant rise in the number of trademark applications which had elements of green based in them. Now, of course, the trademark offices, speak about it from Indian perspective. Um, their threshold is distinctiveness. So if a brand is solely touching upon something green, which can be considered descriptive, difficult to obtain that protection unless there are many other elements which can render the mark distinctive and hence worthy of protection. Um, Okay, I think we can skip this, but just for anyone who has interest in, how should one choose a trademark which is right, we can discuss about this separately. But just to quickly go through, always important to, choose a mark that leaves an impression. You have to see how you need to adopt a trademark. Always advise somebody that if you're adopting a trademark, make sure that it has a recall value. The second form of intellectual property in fashion is designs, which focuses on protecting the visual features of an article, its shape, its design, its ornamentation, or its pattern. It can consist of three-dimensional or features as well, which I said, the shape of an article, or two-dimensional, such as patterns, lines, or color. It's all about the visual and overall look of the product. Here are some examples of, what qualifies as a design protection. In India, the highest number of applications in 2022 2023 were filed in Class 2, which pertains to articles of clothing and haberdashery. Now, the nuances of protection, as I already mentioned, but this is just to give you a bit of a idea behind an example. The shape, for instance, in this, the circular shapes common for watches and bracelets. Now, here, the novelty lies in one loop of the spiral intersecting with the other. Plus, as you see, it mimics a serpent. Now, configuration and arrangement of parts or elements in a particular form. Here, the intersecting links of a particular trapezoid shape. Pattern of diamonds affixed, showing a symmetry on alternating links. A repeated decorative design. Now, the novelty lies in the decorative arranged in multiple spirals. Colors, the particular combination of black and gold. Now, all of this can be protected under designs. Now, why is design registration important? Because you can really claim exclusive dominance. In this case, for example, the defendants were restrained by way of an injunction from dealing in any garment or design that was infringing the registered design of the plaintiff by way of their identity to the said designs. On the other hand, such as in this case, okay, I'm going to come to this later. So, okay, this one's fine. Then you've understood that design registration is important, so you can really keep having that exclusive right. Now, an interesting thing to note is that the Copyright Act provides that, um, if a design which is capable of being registered as a design has not been so registered, um, it is protected for up to 50 reproductions. Okay, this is section 15.2. I've said it in a very short manner to make it an easy explanation. But just to give an example, in this particular case, the desired outcome was not reached because um, 50 unit mark of reproduction of the unregistered design had already been reached. So the plaintiff could not really obtain the necessary relief against the defendant because they did not have design registration and more than 50 reproductions had already been made. So this is a bit of a dichotomy between design and copyright, and this is something which has been a subject of many legal battles, which we'll probably find another occasion to really talk about when we're doing a lecture specific on intellectual property. um, this is just to give you an example of a recent case where, say, the famous brand Bulgari's necklace was being copied by Amaris, which is a Delhi-based brand, and Bulgari was able to obtain the necessary relief against them. Another very important form of intellectual property is patents. I often hear people say that patents is not something which is very common in the fashion industry. I beg to differ on that because whenever you're innovating, you're creating exclusive marketing dominance. You're innovating, hence a lot of innovation. Then, of course, anything that's new, novel, has the potential of being protected as a patent. Examples are endless. There have been patents which have been obtained. For instance, we see this, that I said that drink your coffee and wear it too. There was the present invention provides to be a preparation of a yarn with coffee residue. There's a US patent for that. Another example, I'm not sure if this is patented, but I'm certain that a similar concept is. This designer Scarlett Yang, for instance, used algae extract and silk cocoon protein to create a glass-like dress that grows over time and it can decompose in water within 24 hours. A beautiful example of sustainability on the face, I would say. Um, Adidas, for instance, created a shoe from sustainable waste. Woolback designed a hoodie from eucalyptus trees, which is fully biodegradable and compostable. It completely breaks down within 12 weeks if buried in soil. Soberis, made in Italy, we've seen there's a patent for the process of treating cork. Now, it's an innovative fabric made of cork, which has many features, which is light, soft, water repellent, scratch resistant, dirt repellent, anti-allergic, ecological, isolating, and sound absorbing. It is something that can be used for clothing, bags, footwear, etc. So this is just to give an example of how innovation has been used, has been, has got the required protection under patents law as well. Now, what's the importance of protecting intellectual property in the realm of fashion? More so when your product that you're creating is sustainable. Um, Anything that you're registering, you're getting an exclusive right on that. Now, registration is usually the prima facie evidence of ownership, and you can establish legal claim to ownership and get exclusive rights. We know that intellectual property is a business asset, and registration always adds financial value. Um, if a brand has intellectual property, it fosters trust and reliability, enhancing consumer confidence. Strong and enforced intellectual property protects consumers against low quality imitations. Just how you can sell, rent out, and your homes and your actual physical property, it is possible to monetize intellectual property as well through licensing, through collaborations, through IP valuation, where you can leverage IP assets as collaterals and secure loans and investment. Franchising is another mode, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a basic genesis of why is it important to protect your intellectual property. Now, to sum it up, um, the trend in the fashion industry currently is that sustainable and ethical considerations are paramount. Consumer is very conscious at the moment. They are willing to spend more for products which are resonating with their social, moral, ethical, and environmental values. Hence, there is increased demand. At the same time, there are challenges which countries across the globe are starting to bridge, whether it be in form of law or whether it be in form of government initiatives. For instance, in India, we have many initiatives that have been taken by the government, like, Project Shore, which is Sustainable Revolution, um, allotment of funds for research and development, um, many other initiatives which are boosting artisans' rights in India, for instance, their well being, their welfare, credit and acknowledgement where it should be. That is also coming up so much in the forefront. And laws are constantly shaping up to address issues that are arising out of sustainability claims. It's a vast topic, of course, but this is what more or less is more like an initiation of a conversation that we can take forward from the lecture today, the session today, to discuss more in detail any nuance which is attracted. Intellectual property is very important because only when you're protected would you be motivated to innovate. Because why else would someone want to keep innovating? Of course, there are, say something like green patents, which for instance, Tesla ended up giving up some of its patents because they wanted it to be available to all, right? So there are situations like this which are coming up in the name of sustainability. Brands are doing more than what they've done in the past, and some rightly so, some others are yet to corroborate what they are really claiming to be the case. From innovation in fabric to innovative ways of creating shoes. If you would have seen that Coperni's spray on dress, which happened in the Paris week, there was a dress which was sprayed upon, that that attracted a lot of good vibe in terms of innovation, but a big question mark on sustainability because critics said that that dress was not very sustainable. So if we speak about the solutions that we are really looking at in terms of sustainable fashion, we would have seen that there are alternate materials which are coming by. I mentioned that cotton is a very thirsty crop, but we have an alternate, which is the organic cotton, which is coming up. It's expensive, yes, but it has much reduced water footprint. There are innovative processes, better techniques, hand woven, which is a very strong thing in India, very sustainable, of course, in comparison to machine made. That's on the forefront. So while there is a boost that is being given to these techniques and the heritage by through government initiatives, Law is also supporting by offering the right protection to the new innovations and sorry, and coming up with ways to address issues such as greenwashing or misleading advertisements and misleading claims on products, to make sure that what the end consumers are eventually getting is sustainable and ethical. At the same time, when we speak about ethics, we can see that there's a lot of conversation around rights of artisans, rights of frontline workers, cultural appreciation instead of cultural misappropriation, which is increasingly putting the frontline workers on the forefront. Credit has started coming everyone's way. So, yeah, I would say that these are just some of the things which are currently happening, and there's a lot more on the trends front when we speak of sustainable and ethical fashion. Perhaps I'll find another occasion to talk in more detail about that to you. With this, I would take your leave for the day. I'll stop
Thank
sharing the
Thank
screen.
you, ma'am.
Yeah,
you. That was a really engaging session. And now, on behalf of CSR ITR, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our guest. And
thank
your
you.
expertise and thought provoking lecture have truly broadened our understanding of the topic. We are incredibly grateful for your time and the effort that you put in to be here with us.
I'm
And once
glad.
again, thank everybody for making this lecture a success. We look forward to having more of you in the future.
Would be a pleasure, Nushka. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you, ma'am.
you. Bye bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, Shreya.